So we've got Aaron and Nicola with us, who are two of our club developers, and we're talking about club links. So we'll start with you, Nicola. Can you just sort of explain what a club developer can do to help support their clubs with their education links?
So the club developers have a wealth of experience from working with clubs over a period of time, and what you'll find is not only will they be able to give you some good models of good practice that they've come across or that they've seen other clubs do previously, but they'll also be able to link you up with clubs either within your local area or wider afield that will be perhaps on the same journey as you, or they may be further ahead in their club school link journey and be able to share some good tips and some good experience. You'll also find that club developers will have contacts with the local county sports partnerships, the school games organisers, and they'll be able to signpost you and link you up with those to help you build those relationships with local schools.
Fantastic. And Aaron, sort of your club developer now, was a community rugby coach. Sort of within your sort of time at the RFU, what things have worked for you when trying to get into schools or colleges, and maybe some of the schools or colleges that didn't have rugby or rugby was really new to them? Clearly you would have faced some barriers in there. What's worked well in your experience?
Yeah, I think it's about creating that partnership. It is that two-way process. I think first it's you've got to get it buy into their ethos. What do the school want? Getting to know that senior leadership team for me was always key. The more you can start to forge links with that senior leadership team, the better off you're going to get. And it's about selling rugby as not just that playing offer, but that holistic offer as well. So what can you do for those pupils, or what can your club do for those pupils that might necessarily not want to play rugby, but they might want to referee, they might want to volunteer, they might have a background in some kind of social media aspect or some design aspect, and that could be utilised within your club. So it's about selling that kind of wider picture of the rugby club.
Fantastic. And obviously a really obvious question, how did you get into to speak to them? I know that lots of people listening to this will talk about challenges with receptionists or getting into the contact. How did you go about overcoming those?
So I think for me, there's probably a few different approaches, whether that's someone at a school knew someone, whether it was going through the receptionist, whether it was going through the active partnership. I guess there's many different ways in, and it's probably not a one key fits all doers. It's finding that right key and getting that in. And I think once you get in that initial meeting, it is about kind of selling yourself as a club, selling, those unique benefits that rugby can bring and that unique selling point that rugby clubs have.
Fantastic. So Nick, sort of the next step on, everything's gone really well at the school, students are really infused, go down to a local rugby club for the first time. What advice would you be giving to rugby clubs about that welcome for people entering the doors for the first time?
I think even before we get to this step, it's worth clubs considering identifying a date that they might want to invite those new players down to come and try out the rugby club, to have a club experience. That will then give them opportunity to prepare for that date. Things that they would want to put into place is someone to do a meet and greet. That may be the club coach or manager who's been delivering in the school or at the school site with after school club delivery, so it's familiar to those new players coming and making that transition. Having a welcoming environment, so what does the clubhouse look like for new parents coming in? Is it child friendly? Is it welcoming to new players? They might want to put some food on after that session to create that social environment that Aaron's alluded to earlier, and giving them a positive experience throughout. So what is that player's journey from getting out the car at the car park, going into the clubhouse, going from clubhouse to pitch? Could you buddy them up with existing players within your age group to support them on that journey and welcome, and they can answer any questions as they're in the club facility? Do they know where the toilets are? Do they know where to fill their water bottle up? Could you give them something to go home with, whether it's a club water bottle or a pair of socks, to allow them to identify to the club and feel comfortable coming back? Discussing with the parents what the membership options are, and are you able to offer them a membership that is feasible for them, is attainable to them, to allow them to feel like there's no barriers to them joining that club.
Fantastic. And I think the other bit as well that we're talking to schools and clubs is also just thinking about the kind of the offer that's there. It doesn't have to be the full 15-a-side contact on a Sunday morning that would be the thing there. And sort of, well, Aaron, have you got any sort of experiences of clubs or any advice to clubs on sort of widening their offer to potential players?
Yeah, so I think just kind of getting back to what Nick was saying about that engaging with parents. So in terms of, I've been involved with clubs where they've done social family touch. So yeah, they can get the parents involved as well as the players. So they kind of decreasing that that nervousness for new players coming in. So again, we're starting to build a lot of early rapport as well. That I think is really key for coaches and managers, that we start to build that early rapport. But in terms of like the different playing offers, you might not have a team with a full 15, but can you play kind of 10s? Can you play cross pitch 7s? Like what's going to be the funnest game for those and the funnest environment for those new players to come into? So I think it's just finding that format to make sure that it's a fun environment that they're going to return week upon week. And again, with those parents as well, how do we make it a fun environment for them? Because they're a big influencing factor on young people that they're going to want their children to come down.
Fantastic. Yeah, absolutely right. And, that's the key bit, what's also the wants of the players as well. And we know that, being with their friends, having fun is really important drivers for them. So making sure they're off the matches. So they're really good points there. And I guess probably the next question is almost an extension of this. And you've talked about environment and things that clubs can be doing. Thinking about clubs that might be hosting a school competition or a school festival or some school fixtures. Again, what's some of the top tips we can give to rugby clubs, Nicola, to kind of help them with that?
Have a clear plan and prepare for those events. So if you're working with schools, my advice would be to know what you can deliver and then deliver it well. Don't overpromise, underdeliver. So identify your volunteers who want to be involved in the programme. Identify who's going to be linking with the schools or going into the schools. I think that's a pause. Preparing some documents, so invitations with club logo on to go to the schools to look professional and present yourself in a manner that is going to reassure the schools that they want to engage and they want to send pupils to the club site. So stating that you've got DBS check coaches, that you've got they've done safeguarding training, they're qualified, the club has insurance, all of those things that is going to reassure the school to engage with you. And then once they have got the dates of the events that you want to run and they've confirmed they want to attend, again coming back to that experience that they're going to have at the club, so the meet and greet for the teachers, for the pupils, laying food on after the event, having some appropriately qualified referees, because sometimes what you'll find is that the teachers don't feel confident. So can we provide the referees to facilitate the activity, or the games, or the coaches to facilitate the players' experience whilst you're there? And just again thinking about that journey of the students and the teachers and how the follow-up to that festival or that competition might look like. So correspondence post-event to say thank you for coming, it was great to meet you. If you would like any further support, this could be the door opening for the club to build their relationship further with the school. Fantastic.
And then I guess sorry, go on, Aaron.
Yeah, I think from that is if you kind of try and re-engineer it, if you put yourself in the mind of that player, that young person, and you turn up to a club, what's that first impressions of your club? Is it, are your flags out? Is the clubhouse looking brilliant? So that first impression counts. And then, like Nicola was saying, what's that follow-up? So think about the language you use as a club. If you're giving anything out tangible, rather than just join, these are our training dates, maybe something like, you've been spotted, you were really good today. So it's kind of making that young person feel really good and really valued, and think, actually, they were watching me and I was good, so I'm going to go back next week. So again, it's just putting yourself in the shoes of that young person. And if you do manage to get the details of the parent, one thing you could do is maybe drop them a text, drop them an email saying, yeah, John today, noticed him at the club. He did X, Y, and Z great. Oh, he was fantastic. Can you just let him know? We're really looking forward to seeing him next time. And just getting that young person to feel great, that they were really appreciated. Likewise, if they're doing some volunteering work within your festival, if they've come down from the school, just highlight how good and how valuable they were, just to make them want to come back.
Yeah, really, really good points. And yeah, and I guess the question, sort of the follow on now, sort of, we'll start with you, Aaron, on this one. Have you sort of seen rugby clubs that do this really well? Sort of the whole piece, like the engagement with schools to start with, the offering of support to staff, really good welcome and introduction. You might not want to mention their names, but sort of what did they do really well?
Yeah, no, I think I do have a few clubs that do this really well. And again, it's a bit like Nick said, they've had that clear plan and they've kind of delivered and worked it as a partnership, and sometimes not left the partnership too long. They've kind of constantly reviewed the partnership. That's been key. So that would be one kind of real key bit of advice. Just make sure that you're reviewing as a club, as a school, what you want, what you're getting out of the partnership and how it can be improved. Kind of key that really kind of good things that I've seen is, again, the language that's been used in terms of recruitment, and kind of that investment that clubs have actually put their time within schools and go, you know what, we can't be here all the time, but how can I make this sustainable? So they might have took some mentoring role within a teacher, or paid for England Rugby Coaching Awards or referee awards that the school could use within their schools. So they know that when the club steps back, there's some kind of long-lasting legacy in there that they could still then get transition from.
And what about your experience, Nick? Have you seen any clubs that have done the club links, club to education links really well?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's quite a wide spectrum. And so if a start at I suppose lower level, where clubs don't want to be working with all the schools in their local authority, but what they've actually done is they've either identified schools because they're close proximity to the club, or they've identified schools because they already have a contact. You know, one of the adult players is a teacher in the school, and they've created club school links with one or two local schools. But what's been good and why it's been successful is because they've been committed to that. They've been reliable, they've been consistent, they've gone in and they've been able to deliver. And if they haven't, it's not been a last minute cancellation. It's been clear from the start, these are the dates we'll be able to be in school or deliver it after school club. And these are the dates that we'd like to invite you to the club for joint training sessions or a carousel coaching event. And you know, those, I think we've got some examples of documents that clubs can send out as follow-ups, the invites to training, and that's what they have done. On a larger scale, clubs that have been successful at that top end, working with multi numbers of schools, is they've identified their needs, the club needs, so they're not delivering, they're not kind of going for the sake of going to schools, but they may need recruitment at under 13s or under 14s or in the girls section, and so they've done some targeted identification and then gone to the local school games organizer, who has been able to get them into head of PE meetings. So they've been able to propose a plan to all these schools in one go, because they've kind of worked a bit strategically and delivered and committed to that plan, and then also identified existing students they've got in those schools, so using them as their rugby ambassadors, so using them to deliver talks in tutor time or assemblies and with slideshows of the club, so that it, you know, it kind of raises that profile, but then again delivering to their plan, their objectives. And that follow-up is key, and having a few different dates throughout the season where they've invited players down, whether it's post-training sessions or post-events, and given that quality experience, like Aaron says, you know, a high-profile experience for the players or the students at the club.
Yeah, I think, sorry, Chris, I think one other really good example for me was how the club actually kind of said a thank you to the teachers. So they invited them up on a pre-match lunch before one of the first team games, give them a meal, give them a few drinks, and then they stayed for the rest of the evening. And again, it was about that relationship building. And one of the main impacts that had was shared facilities. So even though the club was sharing their kind of function facilities, whether that was for Christmas parties for the school or prom parties for the school, when training was cancelled either for the seniors or the minis and juniors, they were able to access the school facilities as an alternative provision. And that really came about just because of the relationship they had away from that kind of normal school setting and that meeting setting. It kind of that getting them up to the club, really getting to know them. You know, this is a really good set of people at this rugby club. And it really started to cement the partnership and drive it forwards.
That's brilliant. So one of the things that rugby clubs might think is that actually developing links with schools is a really, really costly exercise, and that might be something that would preclude them from doing that or starting that. Again, seeing it as sort of an RDO community rugby coach, but within your role now, how much truth is there in that, and what can rugby clubs start to do to, if there is funding needed to address that?
I think this is where clubs need to identify what they want to achieve and what scale their project, they want their project to be. If you're looking minimal cost, it's going to be some potentially printing of those invite letters, but again, they can all be sent electronically. It will be how you perhaps acknowledge, or not necessarily reimburse, but acknowledge your volunteer coaches who are giving up their time to go into the clubs, because that's additional to their age grade coaching. And also potentially that cost of laying on some post-event, post-training food to create that whole experience and give value to that. If you wanted to further that expenditure, you might look at subsidising memberships for players that do join for their first year to give them that experience and remove any barriers to joining the club. It may be equipping them with some of the equipment that they might need to play the contact game, for example. So gum shields, socks. You might want to give them a club t-shirt or club shorts to create that identity and make them feel part of the club from the get-go. But again, also a lot of clubs run second-hand shops, so there is options there where you can, provide some boots for new players through the second-hand shop. So it really is down to the club, and it's discretionary to them how much they want to invest in it for the value of the return of recruitment of players. And I think this is something where age grade coaches, if you feel that you want to do a recruitment drive, we need to be having those conversations with club committee and going to the committee with a proposal, with a request for funding, and then having that discussion, which will lead to hopefully an agreeable decision.
Exactly. And Aaron, what sort of sources of funding are
there? So I think it's not a one size fits all within the club. So that could be whether there's county sports partnership funding, whether there's funding from your constituent body, whether you can even start to look at linking with your local Premiership club and aligning with some of their programmes. Also, the school might even have some set funding that they could contribute to extracurricular activities. So again, don't be afraid when you do approach the school to maybe say, look, this is what we can offer. Would there be any chance that you might be able to put some money towards it as well? The other thing would be you could even look to approach a sponsor to say, this is what we want to do for the local kind of town. We want to increase participation in rugby, whether that's through volunteering, refereeing or playing. And then from that kind of their kind of social responsibility, they might feel that they can align their corporate values to that as well. So again, that could be something that you could look at.
Fantastic, and I think you made the point before, there's not one size fits all, and what might be really appropriate funding model for a club down in Cornwall will be very different from a club up in Cumbria as well, and certainly within this document we've linked you to the RFU grant finder, where you can look at some of the local grants available to you. But I think the point that I would also make is, you know, we've referenced throughout sort of the conversation here the importance of relationship building between the club and the school, and actually that doesn't cost money. And actually, you know, I think, you know, yes, as you said, Nicola, money is funding is it can certainly help with the reward to, you know, to get new players in and subsidised membership, especially depending on people's home circumstance, but it shouldn't necessarily be a barrier to developing a really good school club link, and actually just being on the end of the phone and having that regular contact and delivering on the plan is a really key bit as well, isn't it? Cool. Anything that I need to say? Thanks very much for everyone that's watching this one. We've been joined by Aaron and Nicola, who are two of our club developers. You'll find more information on englandrugby.com. Also, make sure you're following the social media channels that we're going to put in the description below, where you'll see lots of really good examples as the season progresses. But thanks to everyone for everything you're doing.